I got to the bottom after that jump and I started having thoughts of, I've come this far. It's all going to slip away if I can't compete and do well in this competition. And as I walked across to the bottom of the jump to go back up the stairs, I don't know why this happened, but I basically said, I'm not going to let that happen.
Welcome to the Injured Athletes Club podcast, the show that helps athletes cope with sports injuries and bounce back stronger. I'm mental skills coach, Carrie Jackson. We're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us.
And I'm journalist Cindy Kuzma. This week, our guest is Olympic ski jumper Matt Petri. But before we get to the interview, we just want to share one of our most important resources with you.
That's right. And that resource is our book, Rebound. So it is full of mental training tools to help you navigate this time of injury recovery. And you're going to learn how important that is in our upcoming episode today. So wherever you love to get your books, you should go. If you have not read it yet, or you know someone that's injured, or you need a gift for your physical therapist, go grab a copy for yourself or for a friend. There's paperback version, there's Kindle, there's an Audible where you can actually hear me if you prefer to listen to your books versus reading them. You can hear me reading the book to you, so you don't even have to read it. We really highly recommend this as a resource. It's one of the, it's one of the best resources out there. I feel confident saying that in terms of learning the actual tools that you can use for resilience and confidence as you go through your recovery, as well as work your way back to your sport or whatever ends up being next for you. It's really I feel like it's just a book that is here to give you a big hug and then also say, okay, let's get to work. So I highly recommend that you check it out.
That's a pretty wonderful description. Thanks for that, Carrie. And also thank you to our exclusive sponsor for this season, Lever Movement. They're the creators of the Lever System, a portable lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. You will hear more about them a little bit later in the episode, but just a heads up that if you're interested in checking that out, you can use code INJURED20 for 20% off any device at levermovement.com. And with that, let's get on to this week's show. As I mentioned, our guest is Matt Petri. He was a member of the U.S. ski jumping teams in 1984, 1985, and 1988, and the U.S. Winter Olympic ski jumping teams in 1984 and 1988. He serves on the board of directors for USA Ski Jumping and USA Ski, and he's a 2021 inductee into the American Ski Jumping Hall of Fame. And we'll, hear about this in the episode, but Matt had a pretty significant and fairly public injury at the Olympics in 1984, or actually before, in Sarajevo, where the Olympics was, before the Olympics even started. And it was really interesting to talk about this because this was in 1984. So as Matt points out, there wasn't social media at the time. Media was different. And this was also in a part of the world where there wasn't a lot of journalists around, so it was just a different time and a different era. And there wasn't maybe the same amount of attention on him. However, it was still he still talked about the effect of that public sort of consumption of his accident and the fact that, he would see it playing in bars or his friends would talk about it, seeing it playing in bars, and just how that adds another element to an athlete's experience that I don't think you always appreciate until you hear them talk about it. You can maybe imagine how that feels, but that's just a whole other, I can't. You can imagine how that feels, but actually I can't. That is another level of emotion that is added onto something that's already, quite an emotional experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This was fun for me because I actually had the opportunity to meet Matt at an event where for Olympic athletes, it's an event where we got to watch the opening ceremonies together. So it was wonderful to get to meet him and hear a little bit about his story. And I just knew immediately, I need to get him on the Injured Athletes Club. So I'm so grateful that he came on the show. And one of the things that struck me, one of the other things that wasn't very pervasive at that same time frame was sports psychology and mental training. And yet, as you'll hear Matt share his story, that was there was a sports psychologist available to him, and he did have the opportunity to talk to someone. So I love this episode because we touch on a couple different things that I don't think we've really dove into detail in other episodes. And so I really appreciated his candor on like the thoughts about mental training and sports psychology at that time, and his theory now about how it's one of the most important things. So, that was my favorite part of the episode. It was really, yeah. And I also do appreciate that he talked about an emotion that sometimes is confusing for injured athletes, which is sometimes when you're injured, there can be a sense of relief because of, especially if you were in a place where you're feeling a lot of burnout or feeling a lot of pressure, and that can be really confusing for athletes. And so, and you can feel guilty about having that emotion. So I loved that he touched on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Grateful to him for sharing all of that. And we really look forward to sharing this episode with you. So here is our interview with Matt Petri. Matt, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us on the Injured Athletes Club. So we have a saying around here, Matt, which is, we're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us. And we say that because injury and illness and the whole life of an athlete can be a roller coaster, we know, with lots of ups and downs along the way. Now, of course, in your sport, literal ups and downs.
That's right.
We know that you're a few years out from your peak athletic career right now, but we say all this because when we ask this question, we really want to know the answer. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today, actually, and I'm not sure I accept that I'm a few years out from my peak athletic career.
That's true.
At least that's the way I think.
That's nice. I like that.
I thought about that as soon as I said that, and I was like, I don't know if that's the right way to put that, but we want to talk all about your impressive career and some of the things that you've done along the way. So tell us a little bit more, though, at first, how you got into ski jumping in the first place, because I know you were a little bit hesitant at first, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and I'll try and give you the short version. When I was going to high school, I was choosing between two different prep schools in New England, and I thought that I wanted to race alpine at the time. And one school said, well, if you try out for the alpine team, you have to try jumping. So I decided to go to the other school. That was not the only reason, but I thought it was, a crazy, insane sport, and I wanted to have nothing to do with it. So I ended up going to Deerfield Academy and very quickly realized that I was not going to make the alpine team. So I figured I would just start getting ready for spring sports, and that was the end of my dreams for a competitive career. The ski jumping coach started trying to convince me to try jumping, and I initially said no. Over time, he was very persistent, and after about a month, I finally just said, if I try it once, will you leave me alone and let me go on and, get ready for spring sports? And he said, yep, that's all it'll take. And he also happened to be the lacrosse coach, which was my spring sport. So,
did you feel like you could say no? Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. So anyway, long story short, basically I tried, the first jump was probably the scariest thing that I had ever done. And to this day, probably still the scariest thing I've ever done. And when I got to the bottom and I was still alive and healthy, I couldn't wait to get back up there. Oh. And so, he knew exactly what was going on and knew that if he could get me off the jump once, that's all it would take. Exactly.
I love that. That's interesting because I was wondering if it was immediate or if it was so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
You felt it right then.
Yeah. There was maybe, we walked up the jumps back then. They have lifts now. And there was maybe 75 steps to get back up to the top of the jump. And I probably made it in 3. Wow. I was so excited.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's great. How funny too, to go from I want nothing to do with this to like, oh my God, I can't wait to get back up there.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I find most amazing is they ended up going to the Olympics twice in a sport that I literally tried to avoid.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can understand your hesitation because, having just watched the Olympics and the Paralympics, like I find it terrifying. But what was that feeling like? Was it just like the adrenaline rush, that huge, like what was it that like won you over?
Yeah, it was totally that. Flying through the air, though the first jump was not terribly far. And just the emotional roller coaster of going from standing at the top, being convinced that you're going to die, even though you've watched all your friends do it and you're a good skier and your brain kind of knows, okay, what to do and that you're going to be fine. But your heart, I think, on the other hand, and mine anyway, was like, nope, you can't see where you're going to land. Yeah. You can't turn or stop once you pull out of the start. You're going to die. And so the relief and the excitement when you get to the bottom was pretty compelling.
I love that your brain and your heart are having two totally different experiences, right? Where the heart is like, we're not supposed to do this. This is a horrible idea. And the brain's like, let's go. Yeah. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I know you were originally viewed as somewhat of an outsider to the sport, someone who self-funded their way to international competitions. And if I'm not mistaken, also, you were called for a time the human frisbee. So tell us a little bit about how your career developed and how you found the confidence and resilience to kind of keep forging ahead.
Yeah, so the way that it works in ski jumping, the frequent question I get is, how do you start? And you start on very small hills, and over time you work your way up to the Olympic-size hills. And so throughout high school, I was jumping predominantly on smaller hills, and then in college, slightly larger hills, and occasionally Olympic-size hills. I happened to go to school just north of Lake Placid, New York, and so my senior year of college, a teammate of mine and I were competing in Lake Placid, and it was a national tournament where the U.S. ski team was there. He ended up winning the competition, and I ended up, I think, 12th or something like that. And there were, a dozen U.S. ski team members there, and so he had beaten all of them, and I beat a few of them, and we both looked at each other and said, maybe this is something, if we can do it once, why couldn't we do it again? Mm-hmm. So after I graduated, I moved to Lake Placid, and over the next 3 years, as you correctly stated, paid my own way to train regionally and nationally and internationally with the U.S. ski team. I had one coach in particular who was very open to me traveling with the team and basically providing some coaching when appropriate. And so, I was always kind of off the radar, not off the radar, but not making the cut to make the team, the World Cup team each year, but progressively got better and qualified for a trip to Europe with the U.S. ski team just before the Olympic trials. Did really well there, came back and just continued that progress. And, I think just really had a good plan going in and a good focus, and things turned out better than I would have expected.
Yeah. So what was the whole human frisbee?
Yes. The point of your question that you were most interested in.
I was interested in all of it. Yeah. Just didn't want to gloss that over.
Have you ever played catch with a frisbee? Yeah. You know how on windy days the frisbee will kind of, move up and down, sort of herky-jerky way, and you're trying to catch it, and maybe it hits you because your hand isn't in the right place. So I guess I would describe it that way. My flights were a little bit erratic and, not exactly smooth, and some would be really long and some would be really short. And it wasn't until end of 83 and the beginning of 1984 that those really kind of became much more consistent and smooth and predictable.
Nice.
And long.
Right. Which corresponds conveniently with the Olympic trials, right?
Yes.
So tell us how that works out for you, Matt.
Yeah. So we were the international trip I was telling you about. We came back from Europe, literally flew right to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So dealing with jet lag, I think we got there on like a Thursday night, had a few training jumps on Friday, and then competition on one of the Olympic size hills on Saturday, another one on Sunday. On Saturday, I ended up in fourth place and basically surprised quite a few people. And then Sunday, in the first round, I had the longest jump, out jumping everybody on the U.S. ski team, including someone who ended up finishing the year ranked 6th in the world. If I had had better style, probably would have finished higher than 4th. But coming out of that, I really was not focused on where I was placing. I was just focused on my technique and figured everything else would take care of itself. But coming out of that, there was an article in the Denver Post that was about the tournament, but largely ended up being about me because, I was coming out of nowhere as far as most people were concerned. Then the final two competitions were in Lake Placid, small hill, big hill, and the small hill went well. The day of the competition on the big hill, I almost flipped in my trial jump in the air and landed way short of what I would hope to in the competition, at which point, and Carrie, both of you will be, I think, interested in this. I got to the bottom after that jump and I started having thoughts of, I've come this far. It's all going to slip away if I can't compete and do well in this competition. And as I walked across to the bottom of the jump to go back up the stairs, I don't know why this happened, but I basically said, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to go up and talk to my coach, and I'm going to do whatever he tells me. And I'm either going to crash or I'm going to have a really good jump. But, you
were committed.
I'm just going to do what he's going to do. And ended up having the best jump of my life, which you both read about, 122 meters, which was the longest jump by an American, the second longest jump ever on that hill. And that basically secured first place for that competition, but also for the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
And you can tell I even get emotional now.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, that's a huge turnaround, right? To go from because there's so much pressure in that moment. And so it says a lot about a person, how do you turn around from that? And that you knew what you needed to do, and then you just needed to do it, right? Listen to the coach. Yeah.
And I had never had a moment like that. And, had dreamed of being an Olympic athlete since I was a kid. Not in ski jumping, as you can tell. Just that feeling like it's not going to happen was just devastating. And then, literally in 100 yards, I'm like, nope, just not going to let that happen.
And incredible.
And that became a defining moment in my life where I have ever since believed that if I believe in myself and I put in the work, that I can make good things happen.
Amazing. Well, you kind of mentioned there, that fear of crashing or not fear of crashing, but the possibility of crashing that crossed your mind. And of course, we talked about the fear of your first jump, but talk to us a little bit about how injury is kind of viewed in ski jumping overall, and whether you had experiences with injury prior to the injury that we'll get to soon. I know.
Sure. I think in general it's accepted that there will be injuries, but in my experience and back in the 80s, most common injuries are shoulders, concussions, and in my case, we'll talk about in a few minutes, it was sort of a freak accident, was my arm, but a lot of people ask about knees. the landing hill is so steep and you're coming in at such a similar angle. Most of the forces are going in the same direction. So, there's not a lot of impact if you land on your feet. Today, knees are a little bit more susceptible to injury. But the reason why shoulders is because typically when you fall, you're putting your arms out to protect your head instinctively. And so those joints aren't great. And so you end up, with your arms getting forced, back behind your shoulders or in awkward directions. And, you can imagine why with concussions. So they weren't obviously as well identified and tended to back then as they are today. Yeah. So I never actually had any diagnosed, but I'm pretty certain I've had at least 2 pretty good ones.
So let's talk about that injury then. You like you said, you'd been training for years. You jumped your way onto that Olympic team, and then you were already in Sarajevo for the games. So tell us more kind of what was going on there and what happened.
Yeah, so typically the ski jumping events were at the end of the Olympics, some of the biggest draws. So we had a long period of training, and the first competition was about 5 or 6 days in. It turned out that the day before, when we were training, it was pretty windy and a fair amount of snow falling. And so the cadence of sending jumpers was interrupted because the officials and coaches would hold jumpers at the top of the hill and then basically flag them and let them know when it was time to go from a purely safety perspective. And in my case, I was held for quite a long time in the start gate. And, hindsight's 20/20, but in retrospect, what I really should have done was because, the longer you stand there and watch the wind swirling and the snow swirling, it can get into your head. And what I should have done was slide back out of the start gate, pretend like I had some equipment thing that I needed to tend with, reset my frame of reference or my mind, and then go back out and start the process over. I didn't do that. I think largely because it was an Olympic, the Olympic stage, it's like, hadn't been there before. It's like, okay, I wasn't in the best, situation, I guess, for making that clear a decision. So I ended up, when they flagged me, I ended up going down, taking a jump, jumped really late, which ultimately ended up in me nearly tipping over. I tried to correct, and essentially what happened was I tumbled down the hill and one of my skis shattered and ripped through my arm. So as I tell people, if my arm had been 1 or 2 inches one way or the other, I would have been fine, gotten a new pair of skis, gone back up and, taken another jump. However, if it had been my neck, I wouldn't be here.
Right. Yeah.
So, life is a matter of inches. So I ended up in the hospital in Sarajevo for 5 or 6 days, something like that. And skin grafts, repaired tendons, and all that kind of fun stuff.
Gosh, yeah. I can't even imagine what that was like. What was kind of the emotional impact, especially, because it happened right before competition. Like, when did you think it sunk in that like you wouldn't actually be competing, and what did that feel like?
It occurred to me after surgery, and it was actually, my emotions were unexpected. The first emotion that I felt was severe disappointment, having, come all that far. And like I mentioned, having dreamed of being in the Olympics for so many years. And at the same time, what was confusing and or unexpected was I also felt some relief from pressure.
Yeah.
Because what I didn't really appreciate until that moment was that over those 3 years where I was just focused on making the Olympics, that slowly the pressure had been building. And, it's sort of like the old story about you put a frog in a in cool water and you raise it to boiling, they stay in. If you throw them in boiling water, they jump out. Well, this was the, get in when the pressure was low, and just because it built so slowly over time, I really wasn't even aware of it.
Yeah.
And so I, lying in the hospital bed, feeling sad and disappointed, and then feeling relief. And I'm like, what's this?
Yeah. A lot of my athletes have that, and it's confusing. And and you feel guilty. You feel like there's something wrong with you. And when it's really common, but unexpected, right? Yeah.
That's interesting. It's common.
And I know the games hadn't started yet, but there was certainly, as you mentioned, you had been kind of a focus of the media from a little bit even before the trials when you started kind of ascending. And so there was certainly media coverage of the accident. What was it like to experience something like that in a relatively public fashion like that? What did that add to the emotional aspect of it?
Yeah, that was also interesting. Then the internet didn't exist as we know it today. Yeah. Social media didn't exist. This was behind the Iron Curtain, kind of, certainly within the Soviet sphere. So there wasn't the same level of interest that there would be today. For instance, in the room that I was in the hospital, they didn't even have a TV. So I was like, oh my gosh, for my whole life, I've watched the Olympics, on ABC. Here I am at the Olympics, supposed to compete. I can't compete, and I can't even watch.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy. Oh my goodness.
So that was a little weird. But the other thing that was sort of unexpected, I guess, was at the time there was an ABC reporter named Kathleen Sullivan, who was fairly popular at the time, noteworthy. And she came in and interviewed me in the hospital. And so that was kind of, again, it's like, okay, I got injured and I'm getting some notoriety for the kind of the wrong thing. And so that was a little interesting. And then when I got home, because I didn't have a TV while I was there, that was the first time I actually saw my crash from an outsider's perspective.
Right, yeah.
And so I've always got my own internal picture of what happened or video of what happened. And then I added the external footage, if you will.
Yeah.
And every time I would see someone that, I knew in college or high school or a family member, for years after that, I would hear, the last time I saw you, I was in a bar and the TV was on during the Olympics and there you were. And basically they were telling me about my crash all over again.
Yeah. And people don't realize what they're doing in that moment, right? That it's almost, for some of my athletes, like re-traumatizing every time. So it adds another layer for athletes when your injury gets caught on film and that film is shared in a public forum.
Right.
It's really, it adds a whole different layer. What was it like for you the moment that you witnessed it from that vantage point, like from that perspective? What was it like seeing that?
Yeah, I looked at it two ways. One, analytically, is what I'm seeing on the film consistent with my analysis of what went wrong?
Yeah.
And I think it was largely that. It wasn't really until many months later that I started having more psychological challenges, if you will, anxiety about it. So when my recovery, physical recovery, took several months, when I started jumping again, I was completely fine, no anxiety, but we had a training camp back in Sarajevo and it was windy again. And it was at that point that anxiety started entering the picture.
Okay.
The worst time of the day for me was when I was falling asleep because I'd lie in bed and I would just picture crashing and I couldn't get beyond that. Yeah. And so getting to sleep was really hard.
I imagine that must have been confusing too, because you were like, but I've already been jumping. Like, why is this showing up now? And it's interesting that sometimes the brain just picks up on cues in the environment that are similar to what happened when you got injured. And it's like your central nervous system, right? That fight or flight takes over and goes, nope, we're not doing this. Like, do you remember what happened last time? What are we doing? Like, why are we? Right. And it just kind of takes over because its job is to protect you. Did you understand that that's what was happening at the moment? Or were you confused? Or what was that like for you when it was like, why is this happening now?
Yeah. I understood why it was happening, but I was confused that, as you said, this was coming up many months later when I thought I was fine. And that I had been training with no issues and had no anxiety beyond the anxiety you might have just, training and jumping normally. Yeah.
So what did you do about it?
Luckily at the time, the U.S. ski team had a sports psychologist on staff. And so my coaches got me in touch with him. We spent some time one-on-one in person as well as over the phone, talking about my anxiety, the source of the anxiety, and ultimately working on some positive mental imagery to help me get beyond that, so that anytime I would start having, thoughts about crashing or anxiety about specific conditions, I would just switch to positive thoughts about those. So that helped quite a bit. Imagery practice is a fairly common aspect of our sport. So it was fairly easy to kind of transition that to recovery. Doesn't mean it didn't take a long time in my case, but to get past that. But, I think ultimately it was effective.
Were you open to that when that came up as a possibility? Because we still see a stigma, right, of like working with a sports psychologist or a mental skills coach. Was it like, okay, I think this might help, or like, I don't know, do I want it? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, my coach suggested it, and I was somewhat hesitant, but open to it, and I knew that status quo wasn't working.
Okay. Yeah.
So we had a good first conversation, and pretty quickly realized that was going to help me.
It might help.
Get through.
Okay. I've been told on more than one occasion, well, you're my last resort. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
So if they're even open a little bit, like we're doing this, like, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. You made my day.
Can you run more mileage without getting hurt? Return to running sooner after an injury.
Keep your fitness even when you're facing a setback? Or get to the start line healthy and faster? If you ask our friends at Lever Movement, you just might find the answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes. We are thrilled to welcome Lever Movement back as our sponsor for Season 9 of the Injured Athletes Club podcast. And if all that sounds good, they have an offer that makes it easier than ever for you to try the Lever system for yourself. In case you haven't heard about it yet, the Lever system is a portable, lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. This is very good news for all of us athletes because it means less impact on the joints, so we can come back from injury safely or even prevent getting hurt in the first place. And the best part is that it's portable. That means you can use it at home or even take it to the gym and set it up in less than 2 minutes.
Elite athletes like marathoner Sarah Hall and Jess Lehrmanth, an Olympic gold medalist in triathlon, have used Lever in their training and rehab routines. And we know, so have many of you in the Injured Athletes Club. If you'd like to check out the Lever system for yourself, use the discount code INJURED20 to get 20% off any device. And stay tuned here on the podcast and in the Facebook group for the Injured Athletes Club this season. We'll have more exciting updates from our partnership. We have some fun plans in the works with Lever we know you're going to want to check out. Well, you mentioned that it took a while. When do you think that you finally started to feel like yourself again, both, jumping and then, like you mentioned, the side effects through the rest of your life too, interfering with your sleep and all that as well. How long do you think it took before you were sort of more back to your baseline?
Yeah. So I would say the sleep aspect was within a few months. I was able to get to sleep without, that reoccurring mental imagery, negative mental imagery. In terms of getting to a place where I was aggressive as you need to be in jumping, took a couple of years, because there's a very fine line between being conservative and safe and being aggressive but not too aggressive, and to get to a point where you can't get that many jumps in physically in a day. So there's not, it's not like you can do 100 jumps a day, and so you can sort of work your way through it very quickly. So it took some time. I would say really wasn't until 1987 that my results started turning back around. And then it was kind of the same run up to 1988 in the Olympic trials, where I had a few good competitions ahead of time. And I actually had a plan, having been through it before, where I had watched a number of other competitors in 1984 in the trials regress from their baseline competitive level in the trials. So I went into the 88 trials just thinking, okay, I'm skiing, maybe barely top 10 in the country, but if I maintain that, I bet you everybody else is going to regress. And in fact, that happened in the first competition. I was second, and then the others kept improving every competition as they lost their anxiety and got focused again. So my results declined over the course of the Olympic trials, but because of that first good result, I ended up making the team again.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of counted on my friends and competitors to not do so well.
The good strategic move. It worked. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And, and I was skiing well, just, got to take advantage where you can.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
You were on the upswing, and they hadn't been doing all that mental work that you had been doing probably. So,
Right. Exactly.
Well, during that time, when things didn't quite feel the same way, did you ever think about walking away, or were you certain that you wanted to try to make another Olympic team?
So that's interesting to me anyway. I had planned on retiring after 84. And then when I got injured, I thought, well, can I really walk away having gotten to the highest level of my career? And how would I feel about that? And so, as I had mentioned, I graduated from college and moved to Lake Placid for 3 years. So that campaign, if you would call it that, was a 3-year campaign. And I was thinking, oh, geez, now I'm going to have to go for, 4 years of scrimping and saving and, living in places that most of my friends aren't and all of that. And so what I did a little bit of mental accounting, which was, I'm going to jump for another year, see how it goes. And then if I decide to continue, then I'll only have 3 years until the next Olympics. So it'll be just the same as it was last time. And I did that before. I can do it again.
I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of how I went about my thought process. And I also knew that if I was looking for a job and a profession at the end of the Olympics in 1988, it would look a lot better if I had some sort of serious work experience and under my belt than if I walked into an interview and, what have you been doing for the last 7 years? Oh, I've been skiing. Yes, I made an Olympic team, but so one of my other conditions was that I needed to find an internship or a job with a major company that I could then use, once I retired. And so that worked out well. I literally got down to the last person I could think of, and turned out that I ended up working like 10 days later, went in for an interview like 3 days after I talked to her with her boss, and they were looking for somebody as an intern, and they were like, yep, you're perfect. And They let me train and go, take off whenever I needed to, and paid a great wage. And that was great.
That's awesome. I used to say sometimes plan B should have been plan A all along. Right?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And what did it feel like to make another team and then to finally get to compete at the games after all you'd been through? And I am also curious, I know opinions vary on this. Did you wait to call yourself an Olympian until you actually did compete at the games?
Well, point of clarification, when I got to the Olympics in '84, we had 7 people on the team, only 4 could compete. So I didn't actually end up making it through the qualifications once we got there.
Gotcha.
But I definitely, after '84, I felt like I was an Olympian and still do. And so that, I can't remember the rest of your question, but the emotional part. So when this is burned into my brain, hearing when I actually had made the Olympic team again, I just burst out into tears, quite candidly. And my coach, Rex Bell, who had helped me from the very start, travel with the U.S. ski team and all of that, he had made a point of being the person to tell me. And so I had gotten up from the bottom of the jump to the top. They had finished tabulating all the results, and he came over, and I could just tell from the look on his face that I had made it again, which was great. Yeah. So that was another defining moment to have such a huge setback, for a life dream and a goal, and then working my way back.
Yeah. Amazing. So then, did you kind of work the plan then, and you retired right after that year's Olympics?
I did. Yeah. Yep.
So you had already been preparing for that. So originally I was going to ask you how you knew it was time to step away, but I think we kind of covered that already.
No. And I already had a plan. I went west and skied, for I think 8 weeks or something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
All over the West. Because one thing people don't often appreciate is when you're ski jumping, you're not really downhill skiing at all.
That's right. Yeah.
Or free skiing. So you're going to all these great places in Europe, but because you're focused on your sport and your training, there just wasn't time to do all of that.
Oh, what a great idea. So you were just, I'm going to ski where I want, when I want, on whatever. That's amazing. How fun.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And it also helped that I was an Olympian. So anywhere I went, I just mentioned that and be like, oh yeah, we'll give you free passes.
I'm going to pull my Olympian card and which was well earned.
That's great. So you've stayed involved with the sport in a leadership capacity. What motivates you to do that? And what have you seen change in attitudes about injury and mental health in the years since you've competed?
Yeah. So as I was winding down my professional career, Rex Bell, who I mentioned before, who was one of the coaches that helped me tremendously, had been on the board for a number of years. And so he had been kind of laying the groundwork and trying to convince me to get involved and engaged for a number of years. And so once I saw a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of retirement, I started thinking about how I could give back to the sport, given the impact that it's had on my life, and the belief that athletics can be a very rewarding and fulfilling part of somebody's life and help people, learn how to deal with, success and failure and how to bounce back and apply themselves. So it didn't take a lot of convincing. He would probably tell you differently. But I joined the board and quickly got on the executive committee and have led a number of projects. And ski jumping, as you know, is not one of the premier sports in the United States. So, it's challenging at times, but very rewarding at the same time.
I know there were a lot of conversations at the Olympics this year about injury, including Lindsey Vonn and whether she should have returned with her torn ACL. And I'm curious, like how those discussions strike you, because you certainly have a much more informed perspective than many of the people who are commenting on all of that.
Right. Yeah. And I was also thinking about, I think a year or two ago, Michaela Schifrin
That's right.
had sort of a freak injury where she got stabbed by a pole.
Yeah.
And I was interested that even someone like her is very vocal and shares kind of how she's feeling about things and her anxiety and recovery. And, one would think, my gosh, somebody who's won so many World Cups, whether it's Lindsey Vonn or Michaela, they've got to be just so strong mentally. It was a little bit surprising to me, but at the same time, it was also very encouraging because I think in particular, both of them are very open about their anxieties, their mental challenges in terms of their sport and all of that. So I think that there's more openness to it. But as Carrie, you were saying, I'm sure you still hear a lot of people, you're my last resort, which is unfortunate. So, I think that there's still some work to be done there for sure. And I know in our sport, when you have to make decisions about funding, it's like another coach, sports psychologist.
That's right. Yeah.
Another training, trip versus sports psychologist or, any kind of mental health. It's a challenge. I think it gets overlooked.
Yeah. I think we get put into the extra category or like, well, someday when we have the funds, sure, that would be great to have, but not seen as integral yet.
Right. And I have no empirical evidence for this whatsoever, but I have a general philosophy that most people at the top of their sport are within, a few degrees of each other in terms of athletic capabilities.
That's right. Yeah.
But, it's really the emotional and psychological capabilities and skills and all of that really set the world record holders and the medalists from everybody else.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of.
I agree with your philosophy. I will say, although I have been, it's people's last resort. I've also heard from multiple athletes, especially at that level, same thing, where they feel like everybody's coming with the same physical capability. We're all out there. We're all doing the work. And they say, you're the 1%. So what do you mean? You're the one that's the difference between whether or not I get on the podium or like not me specifically, but working on your mental training. So I think that I would agree. Maybe we should work on some empirical evidence for that. I'm not sure how that would work, but but then we'll get funding. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm glad you mentioned that about Michaela too, because I did think as you were describing your accident, I had that exact thought of her crash and that the same, an inch one a different way, she would have been fine, an inch a different way, and she would have had her, insides even more torn apart. So it's, and I think that, I think one of the things that her and Lindsay, their example shows is that sometimes there is like just strength in that vulnerability, that in talking about that is what is enabling them to work through that and continue to perform and work through some of those anxieties. So I'm always grateful to them and grateful to you too for sharing these experiences, because it helps so many other people know that that's a normal part of it all.
Right.
My secret goal is to get them on the show. I just say that out loud.
Work on that.
I'll say I'm not sure I can help you there, but I'll think about it.
Right.
So Matt, I'm curious too, especially knowing that you did go on to have a successful career in another field after your successful athletic career. How do you think your experience with injury and that setback changed you as an athlete and a person? And did that, help you navigate other challenges in your life, whether that was career or otherwise?
Yeah, I think it gave me much more mental toughness and the ability to focus on the things that I can control. And that helps, I think, in a variety of situations, whether it's public speaking or, you get into a difficult business situation or anything like that, where It's like, okay, this has happened. I can't do anything about the past. Let's focus on what you can do now and in the future, and come up with a plan to make things better as best you can. That's become sort of a tenet of my progression as a human, I guess, is, it's like, okay, I made the best decision, hopefully, that I could at the time based on what I knew. If something's changed or, some other outside influence has changed the situation, let's focus on what we can do right now to make things better or, keep them the same if that's the state you want to be in.
Yeah. Excellent. And I'm curious too, if it's possible, if you could go back now and talk to the Matt who'd just been helicoptered off the mountain and wasn't sure what was going to happen next, what do you think you'd tell him?
Boy, I think about that a fair amount. People talk about if you could go back and change one thing. As I described to you, I probably would have changed that one jump, but then who knows what else would have changed since then. So, I don't have an answer for you. I'm not sure what I would tell him. And the same thing's true with that one jump in the Olympic trials. If I hadn't been through that, my life would be very different. If I hadn't almost crashed then and had that moment of feeling like it was slipping away and then grabbing it back, things would be different.
I love that because I think it's easy to kind of think about sometimes like, I would change this and I'd change that. But when you're thoughtful about it and think about like, well, I kind of like where I landed. So if I change that, I don't know if I'd want anything else to change. So it's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. But there's definitely, if you could take two life paths simultaneously, which who knows, maybe you can. I definitely would have liked to have seen how things would have turned out, if I had been able to compete. And there's the technique that's used today. It's interesting. A few of us went back and looked at a video that my sister had taken from the bottom of the hill. And without getting down into the weeds, back when I jumped, everybody jumped with their skis close together in front of them. Now everybody jumps with their ski tips spread apart in what's called the V.
Yeah.
And when I had my 122-meter jump, looking at the video from the bottom, you could see that my skis weren't in a V shape, but they were very far apart, which creates a much bigger lifting surface. You can fly better.
Oh,
and
interesting.
We just didn't know when I was having really good jumps, that probably was why. So back to your prior question, if there was something that I could change, it would have.
I'd tell him that.
I would have changed us looking at more than just the takeoff technique. I would have wished that we had looked at multiple angles and thought about, all right, what's going on here flying? Why does Matt always do better on larger hills? Fly further.
Interesting.
And that maybe it's something that's going on in the air as opposed to when you're jumping, taking off.
Oh, that's
so,
It's interesting. And also just, so fascinating the way techniques and technology of every sport evolves, and something that seems like obvious now, like just wasn't even
it's
considered at the time. It's
right. Yeah. Well, and being on the board of USA ski jumping, I think about that all the time. There have been a couple of moments in ski jumping in my timeline where technique has changed and nobody thought of it before. And after the fact, like you said, Cindy, it's like, okay, why didn't we think of that before? So what's the thing that we're not thinking of now?
Right.
That 5-10 years from now, we'll all look back and go, well, duh.
Oh, right. That's so true. Because every time we're like, well, we can't possibly get better than what we are right now. And then we do. So
exactly. Yeah. So I think about it a lot. Haven't come up with a solution yet. But,
Yeah.
and the sport is so very different than it was when I jumped. It's so much more focused on the aspects of flying. And so suit manufacturing, fabrication, and structure and equipment is so much more important than it was back then. There were so many fewer regulations regarding equipment when I skied. You obviously have heard some of the stories about ski jumping suits recently, and unsubstantiated rumors about
there's always
genitals.
That was the thing about that, right? Like, it wasn't even, no one had actually done that, but it just was
some tabloid, I think, in Europe or England said, would this be possible?
Yeah.
And I think the answer was, yeah, of course. And, humans come up with crazy ideas. But I would say the regulations that have come into play have been to ensure the, what's the word I'm looking for, the fairness of competitions, so that everybody is essentially, playing with the same equipment in the same field. We think of ski jumping a little bit like Formula One racing, at a much lower level, in that there's been a lot of research put into how to get more distance out using equipment, as opposed to, the point of ski jumping is who can go the furthest, not who's got the better technology.
Yeah.
So the regulations are for fairness, but also safety. And so a lot of people do think that ski jumping is a perilous sport where you're taking your life, into your own hands, that there's a lot of risk. And while crashes can be spectacular, they're usually not catastrophic in terms of injuries. There certainly are examples where it has been, but it's typically a much safer sport than you could convince people to do, unless you could get them to jump to really understand it. And odds are I'm not going to convince either one of you two to go off the ski jump anytime soon.
But it's interesting. Because I would get that. I think there's a lot of sports. I can't remember where I was talking about this, but there's a lot of sports where, like, the perception is that they're perilous and there's huge risk. But when you actually do it, because I used to be a big rock climber, it's same thing. It's like, there's nothing safer if you know what you're doing, but that's not what people think when they've never done it. They're like, what? Why would you jump off that? That's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and here I am, having been a ski jumper, and I do think rock climbing is crazy. And
that's okay, because I think ski jumping's crazy, so we're good.
Oh gosh, Matt. Well, we're so grateful to you for sharing all of this with us. And I know our listeners are really going to appreciate your perspective. If there's an athlete out there right now listening who is maybe in one of those more difficult spots that you were in, feeling some anxiety, not sure, working through their injury recovery process, is there any other advice you'd give them beyond what you've already shared about what you did?
Yeah. I think about that a fair amount. I think that athletes at any level, but especially higher levels, have to understand that injuries are going to occur, and maybe not at the best time, like in my case. And so spending a little bit of time thinking about that in advance, about how you might deal with something that you need to overcome, I think would be beneficial. And then, as Carrie would be happy to hear me say, seeking help and being open about it, and being like Michaela and Lindsay, and, sharing your struggles. And maybe it doesn't need to be that open and that public, but certainly within your, inner circle, coaches, family, friends, because if you don't address anxiety or whatever's going on, it's just going to continue to drag on. So I would say, you're going to get through it, and you'll get through it quicker and probably in better shape if you get as much help as you can, whether that's a coach or psychologist or whomever.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Matt, so much. We really appreciate it. And we are grateful to you, and we look forward to hearing, following along and seeing when you do figure out what that next innovation is. We'll be sure to be watching along.
I will let you know. It's been a pleasure talking with both of you as well.
Thanks again to Matt for joining us, and to our sponsor, Lever Movement, for making the show possible. Remember, you can use code INJURED20 for 20% off any device at levermovement.com. Of course, we are so grateful to Jeremy Nessel for editing this and every single episode of the Injured Athletes Club, and we are incredibly grateful to you, our listeners and club members. You should know, as you are a member of the best club that no one ever wants to join, we have merch for you that you can wear and show your pride. If you head to our website, injuredathletesclub.com, and hit the shop button, you'll find a store with hoodies, shirts, stickers, mugs, and please head there at some point soon, because we had a technical problem with the store the other day and it took me 3 hours to fix it, and now it works, so I want everyone to go. If you tried to buy something before and it didn't work, I'm very sorry, and I promise it works now. So head there, and it's a great place to treat yourself a little bit, or if you have an injured athlete in your life, to buy them a little bit something special to help them remember that they are stronger every day, or that recovery is now their sport. We have shirts and gear with all those sayings on them. Also, if you know another injured athlete in your life and the show has been helpful to you at all in your recovery journey, please share an episode with them. Hit that subscribe button so you get every single new episode. Leave us a rating or a review. That really helps other injured athletes find us, and we hope that they get something out of the show too, just like you do. And remember that between episodes, you can join our Facebook group, which is also called the Injured Athletes Club. There you'll find support and advice from other people who just get it. You can get links to all of that on our website, injuredathletesclub.com. We'll see you there.